NHS data shows people who signed up for a weight loss programme were, on average, more than £5 heavier than 3 years before COVID struck. There are concerns this could lead to an increase in the number of people at risk of developing type 2 diabetes.
Blackpool's famous illuminations are lighting up the seaside town again. Any day now.
Just
there
like
they
that.
are.
Staying on a couple of months extra this year until January. The idea is that hopefully they'll bring more tourists to help with businesses who've struggled, clearly.
Can't wait. It is coming up to 9:10 on your Saturday morning. Let's return to our main story now. And that is the decision by the UK's vaccine advisory body not to recommend vaccinating all 12 to 15-year-olds.
So what's the evidence? What might the government decide as it goes forward? Let's speak to our regular Saturday panel, joined, of course, by Linda Bauld, who's Professor of Public Health, and virologist Dr. Chris Smith. Very good morning to both of you. Now, what I'm going to try and do is, because there's a lot for people to get their heads around this morning in connection with this decision, the JCVI decision. Chris, I wonder if you can kind of pick up on some of the evidence in terms of the decision they've made. Maybe, Linda, you can pick up afterwards about some of the wider context, as in what the chief medical officers and the government might do with that information. Do you want to kick us off, Chris?
Sure thing. The JCVI is the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation.
To clear. So really a mostly dry day today. Spells of sunshine around. We've still got high pressure in charge. It's been with us for a long time now.
They're absolutely fine.
And to what extent will the JCVI have taken in consideration of long COVID? Because the data on that, it's almost too soon for that, isn't it?
Hard for them to say, and therefore, just on the basis of disease prevention, it is justified.
Staying on a couple of months extra this year until January.
Down these streets, people's belongings and memories are laid out for garbage pickup. The Rodin family lost 3 cars and everything in their basement, but already the insurance company has told them they won't cover much of the damage.
It's the first time that it happened, but if we stay in the house, what if it happens again? Like, does it really pay to stay in this area anymore?
President Biden has approved an emergency declaration.
Cost to life, property, and infrastructure has been staggering. Still, climate change remains a divisive political issue. And so over the years, America has ignored warnings. And some would say this is the result. Nana Taufik, BBC News, New Jersey.
New evidence has emerged that people have put on weight during the pandemic.
Has a side effect. And so they're weighing up, if we take this group and we give them this vaccine and we know how well it performs in that group in terms of preventing disease, preventing severe disease, and how many at-risk people there are, does the use of that vaccine in that group actually justify using it in that group? When we use the vaccine, we get about 10 times as many cases of myocarditis as we would prevent severe disease in this group. And because there's such a closeness in those numbers, it's very hard for them to say, and therefore, just on the basis of disease prevention, it is justified to protect this group. Should they be going into other sectors of society, or are they best used treating young children? And those are the facts they've been trying to balance up.
And Linda, it's very difficult, isn't it? Because in some ways you're comparing apples with oranges, the cases of myocarditis against the cases of going into ICU through COVID. Different conditions and slightly different numbers, but still on both of them, pretty minuscule numbers in terms of the danger.
That's true. And but I think if you're a parent thinking about risks to your child, you're concerned about COVID, you'd be concerned even if there was a small risk of a very rare adverse event. But as Chris says, what JCVI was tasked to do was to weigh up the risks and benefits in relation to young people themselves and in relation to health. I think if we look at the wider factors, though, these are really important. As you vaccinate more adults, the proportion of positive cases gets concentrated in younger people. And you can see that in Scotland. We've had a 100% increase in cases in 12 to 15-year-olds over the last week or so. And of course, that's just because more of them are mixing. It's not just about schools. So we want to push that down. And although vaccination cannot prevent transmission, it can reduce it. So that's the first thing, a wider consideration that could be taken into account. The second wider consideration, as Chris has just touched on, of course, is if there is infection in younger people, they can still pass it on to older adults, some of whom, even though the vaccines provide good protection, they don't provide 100% protection.
Who will be worried that they've already had the vaccine. Did they make the wrong decision?
I don't think so. I think they've made absolutely the right decision. And many other countries have already gone down this path. America has vaccinated millions of their young people. Israel, France, Italy, other countries are well ahead of us on this front because they judge there to be a very low risk of any kind of side effect. It's not insignificant as a number and could continue to be very disruptive to those young people's education and their life. So preventing that, if you have a vaccine and you don't catch coronavirus, you can't have long COVID.
Linda, let's focusing on schools for a moment. It's a really hot topic this week. I know schools in Scotland have been back for a little while, haven't they? But around the UK, either started this week or the beginning of next week. So this question from Colin. I'm a secondary school head teacher, so he's in the thick of it, worried about keeping my pupils and staff safe. What are the most important measures I should be taking?
Thanks, Charlie. Really good question from Colin. I mean, the school's return has gone well here in Scotland generally. We have, of course, seen rising cases amongst young people, as I was mentioning earlier, and some also getting tests because they were contact and actually having to wait longer for a test result because we've had so many cases. But for Colin, I think, you know, many of my colleagues have been concerned that there are not enough mitigations in schools, and they've written to politicians about this, and they've expressed their views very clearly. But from a teacher's perspective, what can Colin do practically, even if perhaps some of the mitigations that were in place last year, like more intense contact tracing or bubbles, are not in place this term? I think the first thing I would point to would be to try and follow the guidance that is there and make sure the school is doing that. The second thing is really about ventilation. I think a practical thing all teachers and school staff can do is really check whether school spaces are adequately ventilated. Now, mechanical ventilation can be used, but just good old-fashioned opening windows, and you'll get a sense when the room is too stuffy. And while we're still in better weather, trying to do more outside. So those are two really practical things. And ask questions of the school if ventilation is a concern. Most schools should be able to get carbon dioxide monitors, which will be able to test the quality of the air. And then finally, I think distancing if you can. And then if there is an outbreak in schools or around schools, there are extra steps that schools can take. For example, the local director of public health may suggest that face coverings are worn again in sectors.
And overpopulated is going to be a risk factor for the transmission of any infectious disease. And hitherto, in previous years, we've seen big seasonal surges in many respiratory infections, which we previously dubbed the common cold, and lost through ill health in the workplace. In just the UK, every year, it adds up to millions. And that's because of things probably people caught in public transport settings, in work settings, and in leisure settings. And so the fact that this is focusing our attention on how to build a better environment, the direction, and people are justifiably beginning to ask the right sorts of questions to encourage that to happen.
Yeah, and I think people will think twice, won't they, about getting onto a train or entering the office when they've got a sniff, or why not work from home, especially now hybrid working patterns are coming in. So that's got to be a good thing. Chris, you talked there about the conversion of COVID from what it is now in the midst of the pandemic towards the common cold. Robin has been in touch. He says if we don't, or she, not sure, if we don't provide booster vaccines for all, what is to stop runaway hospitalisations in winter as the effectiveness wanes? And this is coupled with, as we've learned today, the fact that flu jabs aren't being rolled out in the way that they should have been. That's not running to schedule. How worried are you about that?
Right. Well, I think probably one must bear in mind that we don't know what the long-term protection conferred by these vaccines will be. Speculation is that once everyone has a baseline level of protection against this new coronavirus, and they have that immune memory, were they to encounter it again, even years later, they wouldn't have a severe disease run in with it. They would have a much more trivial infection. The patient is, in the long run, and this is what we're hoping will be the case, the level of underlying immune memory in the population will go up, and as a result, people will, in future, become much less severely infected. It will have converted effectively a lethal infection for some into a trivial infection for everyone.
Jabs, which I know has been paused now, alongside flu jabs, and we know as well that there's problems with the supply of flu jabs. What's the implication of it seems like a bit of a moment in time.
Was
that for me, Charlie?
Sorry, for Linda.
It does seem like a bit of a moment in time. I think, as Chris has pointed out, there's so many unknown questions. But on the boosters and flu, I mean, the problems you've been reporting today are obviously very worrying, particularly for GPs. But delivering the two in combination was discussed, as you rightly point out, Charlie. In fact, the JCVI offered interim advice saying that the two could be provided together if we had a booster campaign and the flu campaigns. And they were looking at safety, so what we call immunogenicity. Was there more of a side effect if you got the two together? And also how the body responded. For example, you could think that the body might respond better in terms of an immune response to the COVID vaccine and not the flu vaccine, or vice versa. And for the side effects, they found, I think, very promising results that you could deliver the two together. Scientifically, it would be possible to do the two in combination.
As always, lots of insight from both of you. Are you both well? Just checking. I know it's we've already spoken, but everything okay? We all well?
Impeccable.
Very well, thank you.
Impeccable.
All the better for seeing you both.
What would you have done if they'd said no and there were some
I
big
would have been
problems?
round there like a shot to check on them with my medical
would have said, "Go and see a
expertise, which is
doctor."
limited. Very limited. Good to see you both
Thank
this morning. Thank
you.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you. See you soon.
Always got to check. Just
At
gotta
the end,
check.
and keep your fingers crossed that they say they're fine. Let's check in with Sarah. We've not asked you how you are. How are you, Sarah?
Oh, I am very well, thank you, Nina. Good morning to you and Charlie too. We've got some beautiful sunshine for some of us to start off the day. But for other areas, there will be more cloud. Sunshine overhead. This is a picture in Topsham in Devon, taken by one of our weather watchers. So for some of August.
On your marks, get set,